In 2019, a man in Los Angeles was questioned about a brutal murder. He claimed he had never met the victim. No connection, no motive, no reason to be involved. But then, the police found something shocking, an old photo of him standing side by side with none other than Leonardo DiCaprio and the victim. Detective Sarah Monroe stared across the interrogation table. The man, David Langley, sat motionless. His fingers twitched slightly, the only sign of his nerves. He had been cool, composed, confident, until now. She slid the photograph across the table. "Recognize this?" she asked. David's eyes flickered, a hesitation so brief most wouldn't catch it, but Sarah did. He took a slow breath, studied the image, then leaned back. "I don't know her," he said flatly. Sarah smirked. "Funny, because here you are, standing right next to her at a high-profile charity gala, one of Hollywood's biggest events." David shrugged. "A lot of people go to those things. Just because I was in the same photo doesn't mean I knew her." Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice. "Then why did you say you'd never seen her before?" Silence. David looked at the photo again, his jaw tightening. The image showed him in a sharp tuxedo, standing with Leonardo DiCaprio, champagne in hand. But the woman, the victim, was right there, smiling, close enough that no one would believe they were strangers. Sarah tapped the table. "Lying isn't a good look, David." He exhaled through his nose, the tension visible now. "Look, I go to a lot of events. People take pictures. I don't always remember everyone." "But you remembered her enough to argue with her outside a club 3 nights ago," Sarah countered. "And now she's dead." David's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He hadn't expected that. Sarah continued, watching his reaction. "Witnesses saw you outside Sunset Lounge. Heated conversation. You grabbed her wrist. She pulled away. And then, 2 days later, she's found dead in a hotel room, strangled." David ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "This is ridiculous. I didn't kill her." "Then start talking," Sarah pressed. "Who was she to you?" David hesitated again. Too long. Sarah picked up another folder and opened it. Her name was Rachel Donovan, aspiring actress. Recently moved to LA, had connections in high places, and you were one of them. David let out a low chuckle, but it lacked humor. "This is insane. You're trying to link me to someone I barely knew." Sarah tilted her head. "You barely knew her? Then why did she have your number saved under a different name?" David's entire body stiffened. "What?" Sarah nodded. "We went through her phone, text records, call logs. She saved your number under the name Eric Masters." David's face drained of color. "That's not your alias, not your cover name," Sarah interrupted, "because it sure looks like she knew you better than you're admitting." David rubbed his temple. "Okay, fine. We talked. A couple of times. She was a friend of a friend. That's all." Sarah crossed her arms. "And yet, she called you 3 times the night she died. You didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail." David's head snapped up. "Voicemail?" Sarah pulled out her phone and played the recording. Rachel's voice filled the room, shaky, desperate. "David, I need to talk to you, please. I think someone's following me. I don't know who to trust. Call me back, please." The message ended. David swallowed hard. His hand balled into a fist on the table. "I didn't get that message. My phone was off." "Convenient," Sarah muttered. "But here's the real question. Why was she reaching out to you? What was she afraid of?" David hesitated, then looked straight at her. "You don't understand. If she was scared, it wasn't of me. It was them." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Them?" David leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The people at that gala. The ones no one talks about. She knew something she wasn't supposed to." Sarah frowned. "You're saying Rachel was killed because of something bigger?" David nodded slowly. "You're looking in the wrong place, detective. If she's dead, it wasn't random. It was a warning." The room felt colder. Sarah's instincts screamed that he wasn't bluffing. "Then start talking, Langley, because right now you're looking like the next loose end." David exhaled sharply. "I hope you're ready for this, detective. because once you start pulling this thread, you might not like what unravels. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Officer Michaels poked his head in, his face tense. "Detective Monroe, you need to see this, now." Sarah stood up, exchanging one last glance with David before stepping outside. Michaels handed her a tablet. "Surveillance footage from Rachel Donovan's apartment building the night before she died. We just got it." Sarah pressed play. The grainy footage showed Rachel walking down a dimly lit hallway, glancing over her shoulder, nervous. Then, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Not David Langley, someone else. Someone Sarah recognized instantly. Her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. David's voice drifted from the interrogation room. "Told you, you're looking at the wrong guy." Sarah turned back, her heart pounding. What she just saw changed everything. Sarah's fingers tightened around the tablet, the grainy footage replayed in her mind. Rachel Donovan had been scared, terrified, before she died. But the man following her, it wasn't David Langley. It was someone Sarah knew. She turned back to the interrogation room. David was watching her through the glass, his expression unreadable. He knew she had just seen something big. But before she could re-enter, Officer Michaels grabbed her arm. His voice was low, urgent. "Detective, there's more." He pulled up another angle of the footage. The man trailing Rachel was in a dark coat, hood up. But as he turned slightly toward the camera, his face came into view. Sarah's stomach dropped. It was Assistant District Attorney Mark Calloway. She felt a cold sweat forming. Calloway was untouchable, a high-profile name with connections in all the right places. He had personally pushed for David's arrest, had insisted the case against him was airtight, and now he was caught on camera following the victim. Sarah forced herself to breathe. "Does anyone else know about this?" Michael shook his head. "Just us. If Calloway's involved, we can't trust anyone until we have more." Sarah nodded, pushing open the door to the interrogation room. David sat up straight, sensing the shift in energy. "That didn't take long," he said. "I'm guessing you saw something you didn't expect?" Sarah tossed the tablet onto the table. "Calloway, why was he following Rachel?" David's smirk vanished. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Because she found out what he was really doing." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Which was?" David exhaled, glancing at the one-way mirror, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Rachel worked at an agency that handled high-profile PR for celebrities and politicians. She wasn't just an actress. She had access to things she wasn't supposed to. Calloway was protecting more than his reputation. Sarah clenched her jaw. "You're telling me this goes deeper than just her murder?" David nodded. "Much deeper." Before Sarah could press him further, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Detective Monroe." A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. "Stop digging." Sarah's breath hitched. "Who is this?" The line went dead. She stared at the phone. Whoever it was, they knew she was getting close, and they wanted her to back off. David watched her carefully. "That's your warning shot." Sarah shoved the phone into her pocket. "I don't back off." David exhaled sharply. "Then you better be ready for what's coming." Michaels knocked on the door, his face pale. "Detective, we've got a problem." Sarah followed him out into the hallway. "What now?" Michaels handed her a report. "Calloway just held a press conference. He's doubling down on Langley being the prime suspect. He's calling for an immediate trial." Sarah's grip tightened on the paper. Calloway was moving fast, too fast. He wanted this case closed before anyone could dig deeper, before Sarah could expose him. She turned back to the interrogation room. David was right. She wasn't just dealing with a murder case anymore. This was a cover-up. She needed proof, real proof, and she needed it fast. Sarah took a deep breath. "Michaels, get me everything we have on Calloway. I want financial records, phone logs, anything that connects him to Rachel." Michaels hesitated. "You think he'll come after you?" Sarah nodded. "Absolutely, which is why we need to get ahead of him." She turned back to the glass. David was watching her, his eyes unreadable. Looks like we're in this together now, she muttered under her breath. Then she stepped back inside. Tell me everything you know, Langley, because we don't have much time. David exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You're not gonna like this. Sarah leaned in. Try me. And then David told her everything, and it changed everything. David exhaled, his eyes flickering with something between exhaustion and determination. Rachel stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. Calloway and a few others, big names, powerful people. They were running something dirty under the table. Money laundering, political payoffs, maybe worse. Sarah's pulse quickened. Worse. David nodded. She had proof, real proof, emails, recordings. She told me she was scared. That's why she called me that night. She said she needed to get out, but I didn't answer in time. Sarah leaned back, piecing it together. And now she's dead. Michaels rushed into the room, eyes wide. Detective, we've got a situation. Sarah stood. What is it? Michaels handed her a new file. Ballistics just came in. The fibers found under Rachel's nails. Not from Langley. They belong to a high-end suit, the kind Calloway wears. Sarah's stomach twisted. So we've got him. Michaels hesitated. Not so fast. Someone just filed a federal injunction. All evidence against Calloway is being sealed under national security concerns. We can't use it. David scoffed. Of course. They're protecting him. Sarah clenched her jaw. She had seen cover-ups before, but this was on another level. If we can't use the evidence, Michaels asked, then how do we bring him down? Sarah turned to David. You said Rachel had proof. Do you know where it is? David hesitated. I think so. She mentioned a backup drive, a fail-safe in case something happened to her. Sarah's eyes locked onto his. Where? David hesitated, then whispered. Her apartment, inside a vent, behind the bedroom mirror. Sarah grabbed her coat. Michaels, we're going now. If we don't get that drive before they do, this whole thing dies. Michaels nodded. Let's move. Minutes later, Sarah and Michaels pulled up to Rachel's apartment. The street was eerily quiet, but Sarah's gut told her they weren't alone. Stay sharp, she murmured, drawing her weapon. They entered cautiously. The apartment was just as Rachel had left it, untouched but tense, as if the walls held secrets. Sarah moved straight to the bedroom. She pulled the mirror from the wall and felt inside the vent. Her fingers brushed against something small and metallic. The drive. Relief flooded her. Got it. Then, a creak. Michaels turned, gun raised. We've got company. A shadow moved in the hallway, then another. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Sarah pocketed the drive. They're here for it. A voice echoed through the apartment. Detective Monroe, hand it over, now. Sarah recognized the voice instantly. Mark Calloway. He stepped into view, flanked by two men in dark suits. No badge, no warrant, just power. That drive doesn't belong to you. Sarah held her ground. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. Calloway sighed. You have no idea what you're stepping into. This is bigger than Rachel Donovan, bigger than you. Walk away, and you might live to see tomorrow. Sarah's grip tightened on her gun. That a threat. Calloway smiled. A guarantee. Then, the sound of tires screeching outside. David Langley. He burst through the door, breathless. Sarah, we need to go, now. Calloway stepped forward. He's right. If you run, you might make it out of this city alive. But if you keep pushing... Sarah met his gaze. You'll bury me? Calloway smiled coldly. You already know the answer. Sarah took a slow breath. Then, in one swift motion, she raised her gun, fired at the overhead light, and plunged the room into darkness. Chaos erupted. Shouts, footsteps, the crash of glass. Sarah grabbed Michael's arm and ran. David was already sprinting ahead, shoving open the fire escape. Bullets ricocheted off the walls as they dove into the alley. Tires screeched again. A black SUV peeled onto the street, headlights blinding. Michaels cursed. They're not letting us leave. Sarah gritted her teeth. Then we don't give them a choice. David jumped into the waiting car. Get in! Sarah and Michaels barely made it inside before the SUV sped toward them. David floored the gas, dodging into side streets. Engines roared behind them. Where do we go? Michaels asked, gripping the dash. Sarah glanced down at the drive in her hand. Somewhere they can't reach us. David's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Better think fast, because they're not stopping. The city blurred around them. Calloway had just made his move. But Sarah, she wasn't backing down.